Imagine pouring months of work into your dream home, only to have the neighborhood president rip it up daily with her car. One man stayed quiet, tried to play nice, until he finally struck back in a way nobody saw coming. The sound hit like a gunshot. A sharp bang split the early morning quiet, followed by the groan of metal and the hiss of air pouring out of a tire. Neighbors jerked their heads up from coffee mugs and kitchen sinks, blinds snapped open, and garage doors creaked up. There, in the middle of a freshly planted lawn, a silver SUV sat tilted to one side, its front left tire shredded against the grass. Behind the wheel, Colleen Stratton, the Homeowners Association president, gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles. Her eyes darted from her car to the gawking neighbors, then to the man standing on his porch across the street. That man was Bryson Hale, the neighbor she had been cutting across for months. He didn't rush out. He didn't shout. He just stood there, arms folded, watching. And that's when the neighborhood realized. The tension that had been simmering between these two had finally boiled over. But this wasn't just about a popped tire. It was about respect, power, and what happens when two people decide they're not going to back down. And to understand how they got here, we need to rewind just a little. When Bryson and his family first moved into the subdivision outside Charlotte, everything looked like a fresh start. He was 44, an IT consultant with the flexibility to work from home, and proud of the fact that he'd finally bought a house with a yard big enough for his 2 kids to run around in. He'd spent weekends in the summer sweating under the Carolina sun, planting sod, shaping flower beds, and carefully watering each section of grass like it was a newborn baby. It was his project, his pride. And for a while he thought the neighborhood would be the kind of place where people respected that. But then came Colleen. Colleen wasn't just any neighbor. She was the HOA president, and everyone in the subdivision knew her name. Sharp-tongued, confident, and always with a clipboard tucked under her arm at meetings, she liked to make it clear that she had been living there the longest, that she knew the rules of the land. If someone's garbage can stayed out a little too long, she sent an email. If a mailbox leaned even a few degrees, she had notes about repainting it. At first, Bryson chalked it up to personality. Some people were sticklers for the rules. Fine, but what he didn't expect was how her SUV kept cutting across his lawn. It wasn't once. It wasn't twice. It became a pattern. Every morning, like clockwork, her silver crossover would swing wide, its tires crunching the edge of his grass before climbing straight across the corner of his property to shave a few seconds off her loop around the cul-de-sac. The first time, he thought maybe she didn't notice, maybe it was an accident, but when he walked outside and saw the tire tracks sunk deep into the soft earth, mud splashed along the driveway he had just pressure-washed the weekend before, something sank in his stomach. He decided to handle it calmly. That evening, he walked across the street as she was pulling groceries out of the back of her SUV. "Hey, Colleen," he said with a polite smile. "Just wanted to mention, I think you might have driven across my yard this morning. Left some tracks." Colleen straightened, a carton of orange juice in her hand, and gave him a look that could cut steel. "Oh, that," she said. "Yeah, I do that sometimes. It's quicker than swinging around. Don't worry, it's not hurting anything." Bryson blinked, taken aback by the casual tone. "Well, I've been trying to get the new sod to take. It's pretty fragile right now." She tilted her head, smirked. "You don't understand how things work here. I've been in this neighborhood since it was dirt. We all cut across when we need to. With that." She turned back to her trunk, ending the conversation like it was settled. Bryson stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. It wasn't just the tracks. It was the way she dismissed him, like his effort, his pride in his home, didn't matter. Back inside, his wife asked, "So what did she say?" He sighed. "She basically told me it's her neighborhood, not mine." And that was the first real crack in the relationship. From that moment, Bryson started watching. Each morning, without fail, her SUV cut across, the tires chewing up the edges of the lawn he had just watered the night before. Each time, it felt less like an accident and more like a statement. Neighbors noticed too. Some would glance out their windows as she passed, shaking their heads silently, but no one wanted to cross Colleen. She had a reputation for making people's lives difficult, if they challenged her authority. For Bryson, though, the frustration started building into something heavier. Every rut, every muddy track, every moment spent reseeding patches of grass became personal. But this was only the beginning. The next step Colleen took would push Bryson from frustration into outright anger. When Bryson first signed the closing papers on the house, he thought he had landed in the perfect spot. The subdivision was new, the houses modern, the streets still carrying that raw smell of fresh asphalt. His two kids, Parker and Sienna, loved running through the empty lots, chasing each other with sticks and pretending the mounds of dirt were castles. His wife Leah had already mapped out where the Christmas lights would go, and she had bookmarked patio furniture sets online. For Bryson, the house meant more than square footage. He had grown up in apartments in Columbus, Ohio, where his mom worked long shifts as a nurse. He'd never had a yard of his own, never pushed a lawnmower across something that belonged to him. When the moving truck pulled away and he stood barefoot on his new grass, he told Leah quietly, "This is it. This is what I always wanted." She kissed his cheek and whispered back, "It's ours now." That summer, Bryson made it his mission to turn the yard into something special. Trips to Lowe's became routine. Bags of fertilizer piled up in the garage. He spent hours bent over with a garden hose, sweating through his t-shirts, carefully watching as the blades of sod fused with the soil beneath. Every stripe of green felt like a small victory. Neighbors who strolled by would sometimes wave or stop for a quick chat. That's how he first met Colleen. She walked over one Saturday afternoon, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched high on her head. "You must be the Hales," she said. "Welcome to Westbrook Estates. I'm Colleen Stratton, president of the HOA. Her handshake was firm, her smile tight. She pointed at the flower bed Leah had started along the driveway. "Nice work. Just make sure you keep it within the approved color scheme. No wild oranges or purples. We like to keep things uniform around here." Bryson nodded, a little thrown but still polite. "Got it. Thanks for the heads up." Colleen scanned the yard like an inspector. "We're a community that takes pride in appearances. Everyone does their part. And it works beautifully." Then she leaned in slightly. "And don't worry. If something's off, I'll let you know." She walked away with a little wave, leaving Bryson and Leah staring at each other. Leah raised her eyebrows. "Well, that was friendly." Bryson chuckled under his breath, brushing it off. At the time, he figured Colleen was just one of those neighborhood types. Overly involved, sure, but harmless. For the next few weeks, life was smooth. Parker made friends with a boy down the street, Sienna started riding her bike without training wheels, and Leah got invited to a neighborhood book club. Bryson felt proud every time he pulled into the driveway after running errands, the neat green yard greeting him like a promise fulfilled. But then came the first tracks. It happened on a Monday morning. Bryson was pouring coffee when he glanced out the kitchen window and saw Colleen's silver SUV roll right over the edge of his lawn. She didn't slow down, didn't swerve, just cut straight across like it was a paved shortcut. He went outside to look, mug in hand. Deep grooves carved into the grass, still wet with dew. Mud splattered against the concrete. He crouched down and touched the torn-up roots. The frustration that bubbled up wasn't just about grass. It was about the disrespect. That night at dinner, he told Leah, "She really drove across the lawn?" Leah asked, stabbing her fork into a salad. "Right in front of me." Didn't even glance over. Leah set her fork down. "You should say something." Maybe she didn't realize. Bryson shrugged. "Maybe. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt." So he did. He walked over the next evening, tried to keep it neighborly, but Colleen's response left him stunned. "You don't understand how things work here," she said, dismissing his words with a flick of her hand. "We've all done it. You'll get used to it." When he repeated that to Leah later, she just stared at him. "Used to it? Bryson, it's your yard." He rubbed his temples. "I know. I don't want to start a war with the HOA president the first month we're here." Leah reached across the table, resting her hand on his. "Sometimes you've got to stand your ground, Bry." But the next morning, Colleen's SUV rolled across the grass again. This time she waved out the window like it was a joke. Bryson stood at the window, jaw clenched. It wasn't just that she didn't care. It was that she wanted him to see. Neighbors began noticing too. One morning, the retired couple next door, the Wilkins, were walking their dog when Colleen drove right over the lawn in front of them. Mrs. Wilkins winced and whispered something to her husband, but they kept walking. Later that day, Bryson caught Mr. Wilkins trimming hedges and asked, "Does she always do that?" Mr. Wilkins sighed, lowering his clippers. "Colleen's been here forever. People don't argue with her. She has ways of making life difficult." Bryson nodded slowly, the weight settling in. But Colleen wasn't done. Her next move would turn Bryson's frustration into a smoldering resentment that couldn't be ignored. The second week in October, Bryson decided enough was enough. The grooves in his lawn weren't just minor marks anymore. They were scars, wide and muddy, like open wounds on something he had spent months nurturing. He'd worked through the summer heat to make the grass take root, watered it in the evenings, even pulled weeds by hand. And now? Each morning Colleen's SUV seemed to cut deeper, not just through the soil, but through his patience. That Friday, he waited for her. Leah noticed him pacing by the window, coffee in one hand. "You're going to talk to her again?" she asked carefully. "Yeah," Bryson said, jaw set. "I'll keep it calm, but she has to stop." Sure enough, at 7:40 a.m., Colleen's silver SUV backed out of her driveway across the street. Instead of swinging right toward the cul-de-sac, she did what she always did, angled across directly into Bryson's grass. This time, he was already outside. "Colleen!" he called out, stepping forward with his palm raised. Her window rolled down, sunglasses perched on her nose. "Morning, Bryson," she said sweetly, almost mocking. "Look, we need to talk," Bryson began. He tried to keep his voice steady. "You can't keep driving through my yard. I've asked you already. It's damaging the grass, and frankly, it's disrespectful." Colleen tilted her head, lips curling. "Disrespectful? Don't be so dramatic. It's a patch of lawn. You'll survive." "It's not just a patch," Bryson shot back. "It's my property. I've put time and money into this, and you keep tearing it up." Colleen's laugh was sharp. "You're new here. You don't understand how this neighborhood works. I've been here since they broke ground. I know what's allowed." Bryson's voice tightened. "Allowed? The HOA doesn't have a rule that says you can drive through someone else's lawn." Her smile faltered for a split second before she said, "You really want to pick a fight with me? Trust me, you don't. I can make your life complicated if I need to." The words hung heavy in the air. Neighbors walking dogs slowed down, ears tilting in their direction. Bryson glanced around, suddenly aware that eyes were on them, but he wasn't backing down. "All I want," he said firmly, "is for you to stop driving through my yard. That's it. If you want to make this bigger, that's on you." Colleen didn't answer. She just rolled up her window, gunned the engine, and, deliberately, cut right across the same track in the grass before turning down the street. Bryson stood frozen, fists clenched, as the SUV disappeared. The Wilkins couple across the way exchanged nervous glances, but said nothing. That evening, Leah found him kneeling in the yard with a bag of seed, filling the ruts again. "She did it anyway, didn't she?" Leah asked softly. Bryson didn't look up. She wanted to prove a point. In front of everyone, Leah crouched beside him, brushing dirt from his arm. "You can't let her walk over you, Bry. If you give her this, what's next? She'll think she can push you around forever." Bryson sighed. "I don't want to be the guy fighting with the HOA president our first year here, but she's forcing it. Inside the house, even the kids noticed the tension. Sienna asked one night, 'Why is that lady always driving on our grass? Don't people use the road?' Bryson forced a smile. 'Some people don't care about rules, sweetie, but we'll figure it out.' The truth was, he wasn't sure how. The following Monday, he tried another approach. He wrote a short, polite note, folded it neatly, and taped it to Colleen's door. It read, "Colleen, please respect my property and stop driving through my yard. This is my home, and I've worked hard on it. Let's avoid further conflict." Bryson, the next morning, the note was gone. But when Bryson glanced out his window, Colleen's SUV once again plowed across the same path, this time throwing a spray of mud onto his mailbox. By now, Bryson's frustration was spilling into anger. Every time he saw her car, his stomach knotted. He stopped waving when they crossed paths. He stopped trying to stay polite. Leah saw it in him, too. One evening, as they sat on the porch, she said, "This isn't just about grass anymore, is it?" Bryson shook his head. "No. It's about her thinking she owns this neighborhood. And me proving she doesn't own me. A storm was building, and both of them could feel it. But Colleen wasn't slowing down. In fact, her next act would push Bryson past the point of patience, and the neighborhood would soon watch the clash escalate." By late October, Bryson's yard looked like a battlefield. Every time he patched the ground, another set of tire tracks tore it apart. His weekends, which should have been spent with Leah and the kids, turned into repair shifts. Seed, soil, water. Repeat. He could almost hear Colleen laughing every time her SUV carved into the grass. Neighbors had started whispering too. At the Wilkins cookout one Saturday, Bryson overheard hushed voices. "That's his lawn? The new guys?" "Yeah, Colleen drives through it every day. He's tried asking her to stop, but you know Colleen." A pause. Then the punchline. "I'm surprised he hasn't lost it yet." Bryson clenched his jaw and turned back to the grill, pretending he hadn't heard. But inside, the words festered. Leah noticed it in him, the way he stared out the window longer than usual, the way his shoulders stiffened whenever he heard the growl of Colleen's engine. One night, as they cleared the dinner table, she said, "Bry, this is eating you alive. You've got to do something." "I've tried," he muttered. "I've asked her. I've written notes. What else am I supposed to do? Call the cops because she drove on the grass?" Leah gave him a look. "Maybe the HOA? If she's the president, there's got to be other members." He laughed bitterly. "Colleen is the HOA. Everyone else just nods when she talks." The following morning, the breaking point came. Bryson stepped outside with his coffee and froze. His brand new mailbox, which he had installed the previous weekend, was splattered with mud. Not just streaks from a tire spray. This looked deliberate, like she'd sped up on purpose. That evening, Bryson marched across the street. He didn't knock softly this time. His fist pounded the door. Colleen opened it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, hello, Bryson." "What's the emergency?" "You know exactly what it is," he snapped. "My mailbox, my yard. You keep doing this, and I'm done being polite." Colleen leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Oh, please. It's a little dirt. You're acting like I drove through your living room." "You're destroying my property." Bryson's voice rose. A porch light flicked on across the street. Neighbors were listening. "I don't care how long you've lived here. You don't get to run over my lawn because it's convenient." Colleen's expression hardened. "Do you know who you're talking to?" "I've been the president here for 15 years. If you think you're going to make trouble for me, you're wrong. You'll regret it." For a moment, the air was so thick it felt like the whole street was holding its breath. Then Colleen closed the door with a sharp click. Bryson stood there for a second, fists trembling, before walking back across the street. Leah met him at the door. "What happened?" He rubbed his forehead. "She threatened me. Said I'd regret it." Leah's face tightened. "This isn't just about the lawn anymore. She's trying to bully you the next few days." Bryson barely slept. He replayed the conversation in his head over and over, every word sharpening his anger. At work, he found himself staring at code on his computer screen, unable to focus. At home, he couldn't enjoy movie night with his kids because the sound of Colleen's SUV outside made his stomach twist. Then came the night Parker asked, "Dad, why does Ms. Stratton hate us?" Bryson felt his chest tighten. "She doesn't hate us, buddy. She just doesn't respect boundaries." "But why not?" Parker's voice was small, innocent. Bryson had no answer. That question haunted him more than the ruts in the grass. It wasn't just about his pride anymore. It was about what his kids were learning. Were they supposed to accept being walked over? Or were they supposed to stand up for themselves, no matter the cost? The decision started forming in his mind, quiet at first, then louder each day. By the time the first cold snap hit Charlotte, Bryson knew he wasn't going to let Colleen win, but the choice he made would shock everyone on the block, because he wasn't just going to talk anymore. He was going to act. The confrontation didn't happen in private this time. It happened on a Wednesday morning in full view of the neighborhood. Bryson had decided he was going to stop hiding his frustration, and when Colleen rolled across his lawn yet again, he was waiting. He stood at the edge of his driveway, coffee mug in hand, eyes locked on her silver SUV. As her front tires climbed the curb, he stepped forward and raised his hand, forcing her to hit the brakes. The screech made heads turn. Mr. Wilkins, who was raking leaves, straightened up. A few doors down, kids waiting for the school bus went quiet. Bryson walked right up to her window. "Roll it down, Colleen." She hesitated, then tapped the button. The window slid halfway. "What now?" she asked, tone dripping with sarcasm. Bryson leaned down, his voice low, but steady. "This stops today. You've ignored every request, every note. You've laughed in my face. I'm telling you one last time, do not drive across my yard again." Colleen smirked. "Or what?" Bryson's jaw tightened. "Or I'll make sure there are consequences." "Real ones?" Colleen laughed, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Consequences? You think you scare me? I've dealt with bigger problems than you, Bryson. You're new here. You don't understand who you're dealing with." Bryson stepped closer, lowering his voice. "No, Colleen. I don't think you understand who you're dealing with." The SUV idled, exhaust puffing into the morning air. The standoff stretched long enough that the Wilkins couple froze mid-step, their dog tugging at its leash. Even the kids at the bus stop whispered among themselves. Finally, Colleen threw the SUV into reverse, backing out of the yard and onto the street. She rolled her window all the way down. "Fine. If this is the hill you want to die on, go ahead. But remember, I warned you." Then she sped off, leaving muddy ruts where her tires had sunk. Bryson stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, before turning back toward his house. Leah was at the door, arms crossed, eyes wide. "You just went toe-to-toe with her in front of everyone," she said. "I had to," Bryson muttered. "She doesn't get it any other way." Leah shook her head. "You've officially declared war." That night, the fallout began. Bryson got an email from the HOA, not from Colleen directly, but from the board. The subject line read, "Property Compliance Reminder." The message listed small violations: his garbage bins left out overnight once, a patch of grass near the mailbox slightly overgrown, a basketball hoop leaning too close to the curb. None of it was major, but the timing made it obvious. Bryson forwarded the email to Leah with one line, "She's coming after me." Leah replied almost instantly, "Then we fight back." The next day, Bryson tried to keep his cool. But as he left his house for a quick errand, he saw Colleen standing with two other board members near the entrance of the subdivision. She was pointing toward his house, clipboard in hand, her voice carrying across the street. One of the men with her looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight, but nodded anyway. Bryson's blood boiled. He pulled the car into reverse, then stopped himself. Getting into another shouting match wasn't the answer. Not yet. That evening, while fixing dinner, Leah asked quietly, "What are you thinking?" Bryson didn't answer right away. He stirred the pot of spaghetti sauce, then finally said, "I've tried reasoning with her. I've tried being polite. She won't stop. She only understands force." Leah frowned. "Force? I don't mean violence," Bryson said quickly. "I mean consequences. Something that will make her realize she can't just keep walking over people." Leah studied him for a long moment. "Whatever you're planning, Bry, make sure it doesn't come back on us." Bryson nodded, but in his mind, the decision was already made. The following morning, Colleen's SUV cut across the grass again. And this time, Bryson didn't move from the window. He just watched. He didn't wave. He didn't shout. He let her think she'd won, because deep down, he knew the battle had shifted. She thought she had the upper hand. She thought intimidation and HOA notices would break him. But Bryson had something else in mind, something she wouldn't see coming. But before he acted, Colleen would push things one step further, and that final insult would seal Bryson's decision once and for all. The final straw came on a rainy Saturday morning. Bryson had been up early, sipping coffee on the porch as the drizzle soaked into the ground. The lawn was soft, muddy, the kind of soil that needed a few days to dry out before it was safe to mow again. He told himself maybe today would be quiet. Maybe Colleen would take the long way around. Maybe she'd leave it alone for once. At 9:15, her silver SUV appeared at the end of the street. Bryson didn't even bother standing up. He already knew what she was going to do. Sure enough, her tires climbed the curb and cut right through the yard, this time sinking deep into the mud. Chunks of sod ripped up like paper. Mud splattered across the driveway, streaking the side of his truck. Bryson shot to his feet. He stormed down the steps, yelling over the sound of her engine. "Are you kidding me right now?" Colleen slowed just enough to roll her window down, smirking like she was enjoying a private joke. "Relax, Bryson. It's just a little grass." "Look at this mess," Bryson shouted, pointing to the wrecked lawn. "You've destroyed it." Colleen leaned out the window. "Maybe if you'd chosen better sod, it wouldn't tear up so easily." "Just saying." Then, with a wave of her hand, she rolled the window back up and drove off, leaving deep trenches in her wake. Bryson stood in the rain, soaked, fists shaking. Leah came to the porch, holding a towel. "Bryson," she said softly. "Come inside." But he didn't move. Not yet. His mind was racing too fast. That afternoon, Bryson tried patching the yard again, but every scoop of soil and seed felt like pouring water into a sinking ship. He threw the rake down in frustration, mud splattering his jeans. Leah walked over, worry in her eyes. "You can't keep doing this, Bry." "She's not going to stop." He looked at her, his voice low and rough. "Then I have to stop her." Leah's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I mean she thinks she can do whatever she wants, no matter how many times I ask her to stop. The only way this ends is if I make it impossible for her to keep doing it." Leah hesitated. "Bryson, what are you planning?" He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the ruts in the lawn, the mud caked on his truck, the strips of grass torn like old carpet. Finally, he said, "I'll handle it. Just trust me." That night, after the kids were in bed, Bryson sat in the garage, staring at the toolbox. His hands were steady, his mind made up. He pulled out a strip of steel spikes he'd once used for a DIY project, long and sharp. With a pair of gloves, he loaded them into a bucket, grabbed a shovel, and walked quietly out to the lawn. The neighborhood was dark, most porch lights off, curtains drawn. Bryson crouched down near the edge of the yard, right where Colleen's front wheels always cut across. He dug shallow trenches, careful not to make them obvious, then set the spikes in a neat row beneath the grass, just high enough to catch a tire, just hidden enough that she'd never see them coming. As he worked, his heart pounded, but not with fear. It was a strange, cold calm. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about finally making her face the damage she'd been causing. When he finished, he packed the soil back over, smoothed the surface, and wiped his hands on his jeans. Standing there in the dark, he whispered to himself, "Let's see you laugh tomorrow." Leah was waiting in the living room when he came back inside. She looked at the dirt on his gloves, the sweat on his brow. "You did something, didn't you?" Bryson met her eyes. "She'll understand tomorrow." Leah pressed her lips together, torn between worry and relief. Part of her wanted to argue, but part of her knew Colleen had left him no choice. That night, Bryson lay in bed wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Every sound outside made his pulse quicken. But when morning came, and the neighborhood stirred awake, Bryson felt something he hadn't felt in weeks: anticipation. At exactly 7:40, the sound of Colleen's SUV engine carried across the street. Bryson pulled the curtains just enough to watch. The silver car rolled forward, angled toward his lawn, like always. The moment the tires hit the grass, it happened. A deafening bang, followed by the hiss of air escaping in a furious rush. The SUV lurched forward, tilted, and came to an awkward stop right in the middle of his lawn. Bryson stood at the window, his chest tight. Leah gasped from behind him. "Oh my God!" Across the street, blinds snapped open. Garage doors creaked up. Neighbors spilled out in bathrobes and slippers, staring at the scene. And there was Colleen, gripping her steering wheel, eyes wide with shock, her SUV crippled on Bryson's yard. But this wasn't the end. This was the spark. Because what happened after the tire burst would shake the entire neighborhood and force everyone to take sides. The sound of that tire bursting cut through the neighborhood like an alarm bell. Within minutes, porches filled with curious faces, neighbors gathering in clusters as though pulled by gravity. Some had coffee cups in hand, others tugged jackets over pajamas, but every set of eyes was locked on the silver SUV stranded on Bryson's lawn. Colleen sat frozen behind the wheel, knuckles tight on the steering wheel. Her face, usually painted with smug confidence, was pale and twitching with disbelief. She opened the door slowly, stepping out in her slippers. The hiss of air still seeping from the tire filled the silence. "What the hell?" she muttered, circling the front of the car. Her SUV leaned heavily to one side, the tire completely shredded, rubber peeling like torn skin. Across the street, Bryson stood on his porch. He didn't say a word, but his arms folded across his chest spoke volumes. Leah appeared behind him, her hand lightly resting on his shoulder as if to keep him grounded. Colleen turned, locking eyes with him. "Did you do this?" she shouted, her voice cracking. Bryson didn't answer immediately. He let the question hang in the cold air. Finally, he said evenly, "You did it to yourself." The neighbors murmured, some gasping, others covering smiles. Mr. Wilkins tugged on his wife's sleeve. "Let's go back inside," he whispered. But she shook her head, whispering back, "Not a chance. I've waited years to see her get hers." Colleen stomped toward Bryson's porch, mud streaking the bottom of her sweatpants. "You planted something out there! Spikes, nails, I don't know what, but I know you did it. You sabotaged my car!" Bryson stayed calm, though his heart pounded. "I asked you to stop, Colleen," over and over. "You didn't listen. Actions have consequences." She jabbed a finger toward him, her voice rising. "This is criminal. I could have been hurt. I'm calling the police." Leah stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Hurt? You've been tearing up our lawn for months. Our kids have to play in mud because of you. And now you want to act like the victim?" The crowd stirred, heads swiveling like spectators at a tennis match. Colleen's eyes darted around, realizing the neighbors were watching closely, their expressions not sympathetic but entertained. She faltered, then crossed her arms. "You people don't understand. He's dangerous. He's unstable." Bryson finally stepped down from the porch, closing the space between them. He didn't raise his voice. "What's dangerous is thinking you can stomp all over other people and never face pushback. You thought you could intimidate me. You thought being HOA president made you untouchable. Well, not anymore." For a moment, the street was silent except for the faint drip of water from rain gutters. Then, from somewhere in the small crowd, a laugh slipped out. It spread quickly, neighbors chuckling, shaking their heads. Not at Bryson, but at Colleen. Her face flushed red. "You'll all regret this," she snapped. "Every single one of you." She stormed back to her SUV and pulled out her phone. Pacing in the mud, she barked into the receiver. "Yes, I need an officer. My car's been sabotaged." Bryson exhaled, steadying himself. Leah whispered, "What now?" "Now," he said. "We see whose side the neighborhood is really on." Within 15 minutes, a police cruiser rolled slowly down the street, lights flashing. The officer stepped out, notepad in hand, surveying the scene. Colleen's SUV slumped in the yard, neighbors still gathered in clusters, Bryson standing on his porch with Leah at his side. Colleen rushed over to the officer, pointing wildly. "That's him!" He planted spikes in his yard to pop my tire. "Arrest him!" The officer raised an eyebrow, then turned to Bryson. "Sir, mind telling me what happened?" Bryson met his gaze evenly. "She's been driving across my property every day. I've asked her to stop multiple times. She ignored me. This morning her tire blew when she did it again. That's all I know." The officer scribbled in his notebook. "Do you have proof she's been driving across your property?" Leah stepped forward. "We have photos, videos too." She pulled out her phone, scrolling to show the deep ruts and a clip Bryson had recorded weeks earlier of Colleen's SUV cutting across the lawn. The officer studied the screen, then looked back at Colleen. "Ma'am, is this your vehicle?" Colleen's voice cracked. "Well, yes, but—" "Then it looks like you were trespassing," the officer said flatly. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Colleen's jaw dropped. Trespassing? I live here. The officer remained calm. Doesn't matter. This is his property. Driving across it without permission is trespassing. And it looks like it's been happening repeatedly. Colleen sputtered, searching for words, but none came. The officer closed his notepad. I don't see any crime on his part. If anything, you might want to be careful, ma'am. Another incident like this, and you could face charges yourself. The crowd murmured again, louder this time, some openly smirking. Colleen looked around, realizing no one was stepping up to defend her. Not one neighbor. For the first time in years, the HOA president stood alone. But while the police left without making arrests, the damage was already done. Because what came next was bigger than a popped tire. It was the neighborhood itself starting to fracture down the middle. For the next few days, the story spread faster than wildfire. Every porch conversation, every dog-walking chat, every casual wave across the street came with whispers about what had gone down on Bryson's lawn. Did you see Colleen's face when the tire popped? Someone muttered at the corner mailbox. I thought she was going to have a heart attack. Another replied. And the cop? He shut her down so fast. By Wednesday, everyone had picked a side, even if they didn't say it out loud. Some quietly applauded Bryson for standing up to her. Others worried about what it meant to defy the woman who had ruled the HOA with an iron fist for years. Colleen, meanwhile, wasn't letting it go. She sent an email to every homeowner in Westbrook Estates with the subject line, Community Standards and Safety. The body of the email dripped with her usual authoritative tone. Recent events have reminded us that certain residents may take actions that put our community at risk. Property modifications intended to harm others will not be tolerated. The HOA will convene an emergency meeting this Thursday evening to address these concerns. Attendance is strongly encouraged. Bryson read it twice, his jaw tightening. Leah leaned over his shoulder. She's going to make this about you. Let her try, Bryson muttered. Thursday evening came, and the clubhouse filled up faster than it ever had. Folding chairs scraped across the floor as neighbors crammed inside. Some came out of loyalty to Colleen, others out of sheer curiosity. But everyone knew this wasn't going to be a routine HOA meeting. Colleen sat at the head of the table, clipboard ready, her SUV key fob resting beside her like a badge of office. Bryson and Leah sat near the middle, surrounded by whispers. Parker and Sienna stayed home with the sitter. Bryson didn't want them anywhere near this circus. Colleen cleared her throat, her voice echoing through the room. Thank you all for coming on such short notice. As you know, our neighborhood has always prided itself on safety and order, but recently certain actions have threatened that harmony. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Colleen's eyes locked on Bryson. One resident has taken it upon himself to install dangerous devices on his property. Devices that damaged my vehicle and could have injured anyone passing by. Bryson stood immediately. Let's be clear, I didn't install anything dangerous. I protected my yard. And the only reason your vehicle was damaged, Colleen, is because you were trespassing. Gasps filled the room. Colleen's lips tightened. That's a very serious accusation. It's not an accusation. It's fact. Bryson shot back. I've got video proof of you driving across my lawn for weeks. I asked you to stop. I begged you to stop. And you ignored me. He pulled out his phone and held it high, playing a clip of her SUV rolling across his grass. Heads craned to see. Whispers turned into outright commentary. Wow, she really did it. Every day. No wonder he's mad. She acts like she owns the whole block. Colleen's face flushed. This is a violation of community spirit. We don't handle disagreements this way. Bryson's voice rose. Community spirit? You've been abusing your power for years. Everybody here knows it. People are afraid to speak up because they know you'll come after them next. But not anymore. A few claps broke out from the back. Then more. Soon, half the room was applauding. Colleen's eyes darted, panic flickering across her face. She slammed her clipboard on the table. Enough! This meeting is adjourned. But the damage was done. The authority she had wielded so easily was slipping through her fingers. Neighbors were standing, some even approaching Bryson to pat his shoulder, whispering words of support. Others stayed seated, silent, unwilling to cross her just yet. As Bryson and Leah walked out, she whispered, "You just cracked her armor." Bryson nodded, though his stomach churned. "Yeah, but now she's going to come after me harder." Back at home, the emails began almost immediately. Anonymous complaints about Bryson's trash cans, his porch light being too bright, his kid's basketball hoop leaning slightly to the side. Each one signed by concerned residents, but Bryson knew whose hand was behind them. Still, something had shifted. For the first time, Colleen wasn't untouchable. Neighbors had seen her called out, seen her shaken. She might still hold the HOA title, but her grip on the community was loosening. But the personal cost was only beginning to surface, because while Bryson had won a battle in public, the war was bleeding into his home life in ways he never expected. The victory at the HOA meeting gave Bryson a momentary sense of relief, but it didn't last. Within days, the weight of the feud began seeping into every corner of his life. It started at home. Parker came home from school one afternoon, tossing his backpack on the floor. "Dad, is it true you fought with Ms. Stratton?" Bryson froze. "Where did you hear that?" "Other kids." Parker muttered. "Their parents were talking about it. One boy said you're going to get us kicked out." Bryson knelt in front of him, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Nobody's kicking us out, buddy. We're not the ones who did anything wrong." Parker frowned. "Then why do people act like you're the bad guy?" Bryson didn't have an answer. The question dug deeper than Colleen's tire tracks ever had. Leah noticed the strain too. Bryson spent hours scrolling through his email, checking for new complaints. Every ding of his inbox made his shoulders stiffen. At dinner, he chewed silently, barely tasting the food. At night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, mind racing with what Colleen might try next. "You're here," Leah told him one night. "But you're not here. You're letting her live rent-free in your head." "I can't help it," he admitted. "It's like I'm waiting for the next attack." Leah reached for his hand. "Then stop reacting." "Don't let her control you. That's what she wants. But easier said than done." The stress bled into Bryson's work. His boss called after a missed deadline, concern in her voice. "Bryson, is everything okay?" "This isn't like you." He forced a chuckle. "Just some neighborhood drama. I'll get back on track." But when he hung up, he knew the truth. He was slipping. Colleen wasn't just tearing up his yard anymore. She was tearing into his peace of mind. Meanwhile, Colleen's reputation in the neighborhood was crumbling. A group of residents quietly circulated a petition to remove her as HOA president. At first, people hesitated to sign, but after seeing the video of her SUV cutting across Bryson's yard, more pens touched paper. One evening, Mrs. Wilkins knocked on Bryson's door. She was holding a casserole dish. "Leah told me you've been under stress," she said softly. "We're with you, even if we don't say it out loud." Bryson was touched, but he also saw the worry in her eyes. "You're afraid of her, aren't you?" Mrs. Wilkins sighed. "Colleen has a long memory. She makes life hard for people who cross her. But folks are tired, Bryson. They just needed someone brave enough to stand up first." Bryson closed the door, casserole in hand, realizing this had grown beyond him. This wasn't just his fight anymore. It was the whole community's. At the same time, the battle at home escalated. One evening, as Leah tucked Sienna into bed, the little girl asked, "Mummy, why is Daddy always mad at that lady? Is she mean?" Leah smiled gently. "She's just not very kind, sweetheart." "But Daddy's trying to fix it?" Downstairs, Bryson sat with his head in his hands. He wasn't sure what fixing it meant anymore. The spikes had worked, yes, but at a cost he hadn't fully anticipated. His kids were caught in the crossfire. His marriage was strained by his obsession. Even his career was wobbling under the pressure. That night, Leah confronted him directly. "Bryson, we can't keep living like this. You've got to decide. Are you going to let this woman control our lives, or are you going to find a way to move on?" Bryson stared at her, torn. "If I move on, she wins. She keeps her power and nothing changes. And if you don't?" Leah pressed. "You lose us. You lose yourself." The words hit harder than Colleen's SUV ever had. Bryson realized the battle had become less about grass and more about pride. And pride was costing him dearly. Across the street, Colleen sat in her living room, staring at the petition notice she had intercepted. Her phone buzzed constantly with neighbors avoiding her calls, ignoring her emails. For the first time in years, she felt the edges of her control slipping. Both households sat in silence that night, lights glowing across the street from one another. A war that had started with a tire track had spiraled into something that threatened to break more than lawns. It was breaking lives. But the climax hadn't arrived yet, because soon the neighborhood would be forced to choose sides once and for all, and the result would leave a mark none of them could forget. The decisive moment came 2 weeks later at the next HOA meeting. Word spread quickly that this one would be different. The petition to remove Colleen had gathered enough signatures to require a vote. People who normally skipped meetings showed up early, folding chairs scraping across the clubhouse floor until every seat was filled. Some stood along the back wall, arms crossed, whispering in low tones. Bryson sat quietly near the front, Leah beside him, her hand resting lightly on his knee. He wasn't there to gloat. He wasn't even sure he wanted to be there at all. But this was bigger than him now. Colleen entered late, carrying her clipboard like a shield. She scanned the room, chin high, lips pressed into a thin line. For years, she had been the unquestioned voice of Westbrook Estates. Tonight, she looked like someone fighting to keep hold of sand slipping through her fingers. The meeting began with routine announcements, trash pickup delays, landscaping schedules, but the tension in the room was electric. Finally, a resident in the back stood up. It was Mr. Wilkins. His voice trembled, but his words carried. I move to remove Ms. Stratton as HOA president. Effective immediately, the room erupted in murmurs. Colleen's face turned crimson. Out of order, she barked. You can't just... But another voice cut in. Seconded! All eyes turned to the front as the HOA secretary, clearly uncomfortable, looked down at her notes. With a motion and a second, the matter goes to a vote. Colleen stood, slamming her clipboard on the table. This is a witch hunt. You're letting one man, one outsider, destroy everything we've built here. Do you people realize what you're doing? Bryson rose slowly, facing her across the room. No, Colleen, we're realizing what you've done. For years, you've treated people like they live under you, not beside you. You ignored boundaries. You pushed too far. And when someone finally pushed back, you couldn't handle it. The room was silent except for the rustle of papers as ballots were passed out. Each neighbor marked a box. Keep or remove. The pile of folded slips grew in the secretary's hands. When the count came, it wasn't even close. 18-5. Colleen was out. The air seemed to shift. Some neighbors exhaled with relief, others clapped softly, and a few sat stiffly, unsure where they stood. Colleen's face was pale as she gathered her things. You'll regret this, she muttered. Then she stormed out, the door slamming hard enough to rattle the glass. For the first time in months, Bryson felt a weight lift from his chest. He didn't cheer. He didn't smile. He just sat down and let the quiet fill him. Leah squeezed his hand. It's over, she whispered. But Bryson knew it wasn't that simple. The lawn could be repaired, the HOA could move on, but the scars of the battle lingered. In him, in Leah, in his kids. Parker still asked why adults fought over things like grass. Sienna still peeked nervously out the window whenever Colleen's SUV passed by. Later that week, Bryson stood in the yard with Parker, showing him how to reseed the patches of grass. Parker knelt beside him, digging small holes with his hands. Dad? Parker asked quietly. Why did all this happen? Bryson leaned on the shovel, searching for the right words. Because sometimes people forget that other people's things, other people's space, deserve respect. And when you let someone keep crossing a line, they'll keep doing it until you stop them. Parker frowned. So the spikes were the only way? Bryson thought for a long moment. They got her attention, sure, but maybe I should have found another way sooner. The truth is, standing up for yourself doesn't always mean fighting back the same way. Sometimes it just means refusing to stay silent. Parker nodded, pressing a seed into the soil. That evening, Bryson and Leah sat on the porch, watching the kids play tag in the front yard. The grass was scarred, but it was theirs. The neighborhood felt different, lighter somehow, without Colleen's shadow looming. Leah leaned her head on his shoulder. You know, you taught everyone here something. What's that? That boundaries matter. That even the loudest voice doesn't get to walk all over people forever. Bryson smiled faintly, eyes on the yard. Let's hope it sticks. As the sun dipped behind the rows of houses, the subdivision was quiet, not with fear, not with tension, but with a rare peace. And for Bryson, the lesson was clear. Respect isn't something handed down by authority or demanded by power. It's earned, it's mutual. And without it, even the greenest lawn will turn to mud. So maybe that's the takeaway, for anyone watching, anyone listening. Don't let people trample your boundaries, no matter how small they seem. Stand up, speak out, and protect what matters to you. Because sometimes the fight isn't about grass at all. It's about dignity.